So, okay, let's get into some of the themes of what I want to talk about today. Raw plant food, it's amazing. There's so many amazing attributes about live food as a foundational principle. So when I come in here and I talk about raw food or living foods, you know, that's just kind of like, that's just the name we give it to that category. When I come in here and talk about that, I'm not here to tell you that you have to be 100% raw, or you got to do it like this way. You got to count your calories. You got to figure out, okay, am I going to like, how many carbohydrates did I eat today? Am I 80, 70, whatever, 10%? Okay, am I going to finagle my protein and my fats? Okay, I'll hold off on that for like 6 hours and then maybe I'll come back. Like, I'm not here to talk about any of that. Okay? You guys follow me here? Like the whole diet equation, like trying to diet yourself to good health, that makes absolutely no sense. In fact, all that stuff is too hard, right? Who wants to make this hard? That's probably how we all got here, right? Because we've been through the whole rigmarole. We've gone through the whole like doom and gloom and like dungeon of like the whole diet industry. And what I've realized is like that stuff's all made up. Actually, you know, I'm not going to walk around a health food market with a calculator, okay, and try to quantify this mathematical equation and try to get the diet thing right. Because one thing I've realized, like I know most of the top people like in the raw food, like the major raw foodists and a lot of the top people in the health food world, like I'm friends with most of them, and what I've realized is that like people go neurotic trying to get the diet thing right. And the truth is, there is no getting it right. You just feel your way through it. And that's the beauty of plant food, is that it helps you feel. Right? So this is what I've come to over the years, is that actually what raw food really is it's the greatest extraction mechanism to pull somebody out of the most toxic food experiment known to man. That's really what raw food is in our time. And raw food has been around since the beginning of time. So like for some people, when we promote certain ideas like, hey, what about superfoods? What about increasing the nutrition, lowering the calories, and getting onto superfood smoothies? Or like, here's a big one, chocolate. That pushes some triggers. That pulls some buttons. And at this point, before I was kind of like, oh, I don't want to push him, but now I'm a button pusher. Because I'm like, we're going to pull that stuff out. Because it's all neurosis. All of it. And I talk about herbalism. I'm an herbalist. I've been very inspired by Chinese herbalism, the Taoist tonic herbalists of China, that basically they didn't do what all the other countrymen did. Like we heard like, okay, people in China, they lived on rice. But not everybody. That wasn't everybody. There's certain fractions of people like the Taoist tonic herbalists or the Shaolin monks that it's my belief that actually, make it long story short, actually I believe they were actually herbal breatharians or immediates, which is a technical term for someone who lives off prana, or someone lives off the solar and electrical energy of the magnetic grid of the earth and lives off sun energy. Right? That's just my idea. That's just what I think. But I'm really into a lot of different areas. I mean, what I'm trying to do in the raw food industry, or the raw food field, is I'm trying to marry these different concepts. Because herbalism has actually been done way longer than our conventional concept of like raw food. Right? Are we aware of this? Like what we think of when we go to like the supermarket and we look like a banana. That's a great example. Like we look, okay, there's a banana, but that banana wasn't like that. There was no bananas 2,000 years ago. And certainly not in the form we have today, right? Or seedless grapes, or seedless watermelon. By the way, just to make this kind of simple, does anyone think we should be eating seedless food? Food that doesn't have its seeds? Right? Okay, now does anyone know what the Doctrine of Signatures is? Okay, so this is an herbal approach. Like alchemists and herbalists from back in the days, they would use this approach to identify foods in their natural environment to figure out, okay, what is what does this do for, what do you think? Because they didn't have they didn't have Wikipedia. They didn't have YouTube. They had to figure all this stuff out by just trial and error. So Doctrine of Signatures is basically the idea that you can identify what a food does based on the environment that it grows in, based on the way it's shaped, based on its smell. So for example, a walnut. Right? What are walnuts good for?
Brain.
They're good for the brain, right? It's shaped like a brain. Right? If it's in its shell, it's like a skull, and you crack it open, it looks just like a brain. The right and left hemisphere. It's kind of crazy. And we find out, oh, it's got like a DHA, it's got omega-3 fatty acids. What are those good for? Those are good for our brain, good for our nervous system, right? And our eye health. It's interesting, and this I could go on and on about that one. But so, the food that we have today, it's just important to understand these different ideas when we're trying to approach like the nutrition puzzle, because it's not all or nothing, right? It's not like do or don't. And I just put that out there because there's a heavy load of that in the health world, where you got like these people that are so invested in their own ideas that are like kind of a bias for their own reference point. And so everything that shows up to them is based on that reference point. And it's really hard for some people to exist outside of that conception. You guys get that idea? Are we all on the same page? Okay, good. I just want to make sure, because I feel like I have to like kind of bring these issues out sometimes, because it's so heavy in the health food world, right? You got this one person saying you got to do it this way. It's paleo or nothing, and you got this like the Candida-less diet. And the wheat belly, whatever that is, and then within the raw food world, there's like micro fractions of like it's this way, this all fruit, no fruit, nut seeds, no, superfoods are the best thing ever, superfoods are evil, whatever, right? You got all these different voices going on, and so I'm just like, listen, we need to find our balance point, because the truth of the matter is, we're all metabolically unique, right? I mean, that is the bottom line. Like, there's certain guidelines that we should try to adhere to the best we can. Like, for example, raw food is a great blueprint. I mean, I think like food in its uncooked, undisturbed, natural as possible shaped form is probably like the best blueprint for the human being. Anatomically and physiologically, right? We're probably closest to an herbivore. If we really look at our anatomy and we look at how our physiology works in our digestive system, the way our cranial structure is and our skeletal structure and all the stuff on that, that I could get into. But the basic idea is that, okay, we have all this information. Let's make the most use of it as possible so we can actually integrate it into our lives, because we're busy. Right? We don't have all day to be like diving into like every nook and cranny of it. So it's like we got to find our balance point and figure out, what am I being guided to? That can be really difficult in the initial stages, because it's we've been kind of taught out of feeling, right? We've been taught out of intuition. We've been conditioned or programmed out of that. So we have to find a place where we're able to get back into a feeling space, right? We have to get back into our heart. And I just touching on that really quick, I just created my own brand of chocolate bars, funny enough. I never thought I would. For years, people were like, you need to create your own superfood herbal raw chocolate bar. I was like, yeah, but I don't really want to deal with the factory. Like, that's not, I just want to run around and be a voice and write books and, do my work as a nutritionist and that. But then the opportunity came where I lined up with my friend Steve Adler, who is the founder of Sacred Chocolate. Does anyone know Sacred Chocolate? So David Wolf and Steve Adler, best friends, and they created Sacred Chocolate, which is the original raw chocolate bar. And it just kind of happened where I teamed up with them, and we created my own line called Cardiozoic Cacao. The reason I called it cardiozoic is because, one, we're getting out of the cyberzoic age. You know what that is? High tech, low touch. The age of the mind, right? Where we're creating mathematical equations and trying to, like the abacus, right? It's like linear. Everything's linear. Like, that's how we have a bipartisan political system. right? Because everything's linear, it's right or wrong. So actually what we're getting into is the cardiozoic age, which is the age of the heart, right? And it is happening. That's why there's a place like this. That's why there's people like you here, because we're getting into our heart. And the second meaning of that is cardiovascular. Like if we're going to get into our heart, it's probably a good idea that we have a healthy, functioning heart, right? What's the #1 disease out of everything? Kicks that zodiac sign in the butt. What is the #1 ailment affecting people?
Heart disease.
Got it. It's heart disease, right? And one of the reasons for that, beyond the obvious reason that we're clogging ourselves up from head to toe, the other reason is that we actually lost our heart. We lost connection with our heart. We lost compassion, right? Factory farming. What's that all about? That's basically just a disconnect from our heart and a disconnect from compassion for all living beings, right? And you would think if you're in that environment, I don't want to go on a rant or anything, but if you were actually in that environment, you would actually develop kind of this like protective mechanism to block you away from all that, right? Like I'm not mad at those guys at all. The people that are actually working in there to feed their family. Like that's a horrible place to work, right? So I'm not mad at that, I get that, but like if you had to actually you had to inject yourself into that environment, like think of it, that would create some kind of crusting over your sensibility, over your heart, right? And that's kind of bled out into the rest of our society, right? Every time I go around and look at these like fast food restaurants, these like, I saw someone like with a Got Meat shirt on, I was like, I mean, okay, but really? So what is really important to me about this is that we reconnect with our heart, energy, right? And we reconnect with what makes sense. By the way, the color green, you know what the color green is, like what the color-coded symbol of nature is? You know what that's all about, right? Does anyone know? Heart, right? That's your heart chakra, right? No, it makes sense. There's a connection there, right? Also, color green is the color-coded symbol of nature. It's also the green pigment inside of plants, right? The chlorophyll, the plant blood. Like infusing yourself with chlorophyll and letting it ride throughout your veins is the most transformative thing you could do for yourself. I don't care how much you've seen the Secret, Law of Attraction, all the personal development stuff. I don't care about any of that because as soon as you take your first green juice, it affects you instantly at the cellular level because it's real, right? All the esoteric stuff, I love it. I've been into it for years, but a lot of that stuff's not really real. It's just kind of far out. But as soon as you put something into your mouth, instantly it's a download. It becomes real. It actually becomes a part of you. And there's another interesting idea is that this whole revolution around food is actually opening us up to this idea that we can reconstruct ourselves. Right? You know, all the food that we put into our mouth is just building materials. Right? And I have to give the human body a lot of credit. Because, I mean, I was constructed out of like Twinkies, Ho-Hos, Domino's Pizza. I mean, cheese. And I was a high-performance athlete. Seriously, before I got into any of this, I was getting ready for a professional career as a basketball player. I was literally a week away from tryouts for the minor leagues at the Warrior Stadium. And I had a whole epiphany take over. I was going to get married. I had an amazing girlfriend with an amazing 2 children. I was a week away from going, and I've been on the raw food path for about a year. And I don't know what happened, but like something happened to me. It like typhooned me out of it. Right? It's like some kind of like I had some kind of like spiritual transformation and a physical transformation because I was having trouble working out. And this is something I now talk to people about. I just got off the phone with a raw vegan bodybuilder named Wade Lightheart. Has anyone heard that name?
On your show.
On my show, yeah. This guy is off the charts. You got to check him out, Wade Lightheart. Okay, I had the honor of speaking at the Raw Living Expo. There was this huge raw food congregation in Sedona, Arizona, about 6 months ago, something like that. And Wade was there. And this guy, not only does he look like a tank, but I heard him talk, and I was like, man, this guy is on top of it. Like, he's very scientifically, like, on point. And he's just breaking it down. He's like, yeah, I mean, he's just like, yeah, building muscle is basically all about probiotics and enzymes. I'm like, what? What do you, huh? What about the protein thing? Like, we've been making such a big deal about this protein thing for years. And he's like, no, protein has to be synthesized. It has to be metabolized. It actually has to convert into building materials that your enzymes cleave up. See, he broke it down in this interview, and I was like, I get it now. Like, this whole, like, malarkey on, like, macronutrients, like, where do you get your protein? And then, like, on carbs and fats. Like, for years, I would rattle my head around this stuff, and he broke it down. He's like, basically, the only two things that actually work in your body are enzymes and probiotics. Everything else you put in your body is building material. And those enzymes actually go in to cleave off, let's say, amino acids, and to distribute it to where it needs to go. Does that make sense? I was like, man, that is interesting. So we're constructing ourselves out of all the stuff that we put in our mouth. And the beauty of this, the beauty of getting onto this lifestyle is that you can construct yourself out of anything you want. You can go from nacho cheese Doritos, extra pasteurized, homogenized, like whatever that stuff was. I don't even know what it is anymore, actually. Like, I could go down the list of 20 or 30 different things, but it's like I don't even want to know anymore what that stuff is. Like the dairy product, like the conventional dairy products. Like we got to turn that page and just like forget, like throw that into the ash bin of history. Forget that it ever even like occurred. Right? All the processed food, everything. That is what most people are constructed out of. And yet their body still works. Until they get to the age of about 40, 50, 60, then boom, what happens? They break down. From head to toe. What I'm seeing a lot, and I could get into all that, but what I'm seeing a lot happen is actually neurological disorders. That's the biggest one. And most people, like, they're so out to lunch on this. Doctors, they're so out to lunch literally on this. And they're not going to a health food cafe. You know what I'm saying? Like, I actually used to work in the emergency room for 3 years. So I have that perspective. I'm not just like ranting about it. I'm telling you. They're literally coming back, and I don't want to, you know, if anyone's a doctor here, I don't mean to offend anybody. I'm just giving you what I've seen. Literally, I would walk down the hall during lunch, and I would see them walk by me, and I'd be like, because I'd see what's in their plate when they go back to work. I'm like, oh my God, it's like fried chicken, plastic case, soda, like all of it, right? Macaroni and cheese, Doritos on there. There might be a piece of like sauerkraut or something, probably not organic. And then they're going back to work, right? That's like the most important job ever. And by the way, what I learned out of that whole experience, if you ever have to go to the hospital, don't ever get surgery before or after 12 o'clock. Seriously, if you're ever going to get surgery or anything like that, you better do it early in the morning. Otherwise, you know what, all bets are off after that.